Are we up? Hello, everybody. We are about to begin a Victoria mayoral debate. All of the mayoral candidates for Victoria have been invited today. We have 9 of 10 attending, and in just a few moments we will begin our broadcast where we will be asking the candidates to introduce themselves to voters. We'll give those candidates a chance to ask each other questions, and we will also be posing some questions to the candidates as well. We appreciate everybody for joining us for this today, both in the studio but also out there listening. And that is what the situation is for now. We are just about ready to begin, so we'll get going shortly. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a CFAX 1070 2018 Victoria mayoral debate. We have invited all of the candidates who are running to be mayor of Victoria here today, and 9 of 10 have arrived. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of the candidates that we are on the homeland of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. A couple of bits of housekeeping. Candidates have been seated at random since seating order will determine speaking order, and candidates will be held strictly to time when giving responses. Myself, the moderator, will be displaying this colored card to signify when you have 10 seconds left, and I should introduce myself as well. My name is Ryan Price. I'll be guiding you through today. Now, let's get straight into it. Let's get straight to the introductions. We've called this the elevator pitch segment of our debate, where we'll be giving each of the candidates 60 seconds to introduce yourselves and let voters know why they should vote for you. And we will begin at this end of the table. Again, the seating has been determined at random, and the first is Saul Anderson.
Thanks, Ryan. This was all random, including the radio going down, but there is a reason you should vote for me. We have enough elites in government, pandering lawyers, academics, and bureaucrats, representing a status quo that isn't working. Instead, I offer a truly grassroots approach to increase transparency and engage the public more, reaching out with social media, PSAs, or bus ads to publicize important policy initiatives or community forums. Meanwhile, some things I could do immediately. For one, I'll fix traffic. Believe me, 20 years of cab driving makes me uniquely qualified to make effective changes involving a regional transportation strategy, including a counterflow lane up Douglas and a transit corridor on the old E&N line. For another, I would mandate a green roof for all new buildings and would more actively promote the Growing in the City program in the interests of food and water security. These are but a few of the ideas I hope to discuss with you, the citizens of Victoria. I'm Saul Anderson, not just some weirdo running for mayor. I have a BA in political economics and actually went to school for this.
Thank you. Next, Raimo.
Hi there, I represent Campaign Raimo. We advocate for a more direct democracy, just like most of my other candidates. Let Victoria use collaborative conversation to create consent-based decision-making. We need more spaces, places, and more times for this process. However, these spaces must be safe. Over the past few weeks, we have been witness to the pornography of politics, taking what should be an intimate process of working together in democracy and replacing it with the perversion of yelling, name-calling, prop-waving, and smear campaigning through accusation after accusation. While entertaining for some, can you imagine just being an ordinary citizen on the receiving end of that? Can my fellow candidates here, and any candidate intending to uphold a position in democracy, take responsibility for creating a healthier dialogue, a proactive dialogue, or at the very least, a safe one? I think it's time to take a good look in the mirror, because it's time to start leading by example.
Thank you. Next, we have Alexander Schmid, 60 seconds.
Thank you, Ryan. If you vote for me, things of importance will be done on time and on budget. Your tax dollars will not be spent on frivolous things like failed attempts at artistic decoration around the city. Those allocated funds will be used instead to find cultural enrichment for people of lesser means by distributing free entrance tickets for opera, ballet, symphony, the museum, etc. By supporting the arts, we will promote a more vibrant, healthy community in the long run. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Rob Duncan, 60 seconds.
My name is Rob Duncan. I'm running for mayor of Victoria because Victoria has a housing crisis that's not being addressed. Victoria's housing situation is a big mess that's been neglected for a long time, and there are all kinds of things we could be doing about it that we haven't been. The starting point of my platform is that housing is a human right, and in a world where Justin Trudeau can pull $4.5 billion out of his hat to please the oil industry, we can manage to house everybody. Despite my emphasis on housing, I'm not a one-issue candidate. My platform includes 7 other bold and innovative ideas whose time has come. I'm the candidate with the exciting platform for those wanting to vote for bold, forward-looking ideas instead of just voting for personalities. Check it out at duncanformayor.ca, and I'm sure you'll agree.
Thank you. Next, Lisa Helps.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Helps, and it's been an honor to serve as your mayor for the last 4 years. When I took office, we had an incomplete bridge, an unstarted sewage project, a transportation system stuck in the 20th century, a downtown retail vacancy rate of over 10%, no dedicated funding for homelessness and housing, and no leadership on climate action. Fast forward 4 years, working with the community, we've tackled all of these issues. But now we have new challenges to work through together. How do we make Victoria more affordable and more inclusive? How do we ensure that our economy stays strong even while businesses are struggling to find workers because workers are struggling to find housing? How do we make sure that we build a truly sustainable city for the future? And most importantly of all, how do we make sure that we restore civility to public dialogue? I look forward to working with you for the next 4 years on these challenges, and I look forward to being reelected on October 20th. Thank you.
Next, Bruce McGuigan.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I'm Bruce McGuigan. I'm a candidate for mayor in the city of Victoria. I've been a resident of Victoria for 25 years. I've raised a family here. I've had 3 kids graduate from Vic High. I have experienced in government as a senior policy advisor and manager of policy and across a range of areas of provincial government related to governance in the city of Victoria as well. I've experienced in municipal employment as well. Over the last decade, I've been quite involved in nonprofits in Victoria, and I spent 5 years as Executive Director of Family Services of Greater Victoria. I'm very concerned about the future of our city. I'm very concerned about proper planning, not just for developers, but for community planning as well. I'm concerned that this will continue to be a city where my family can live, perhaps grandchildren or great-grandchildren one day. Thank you very much.
Next candidate, 60 seconds to Stephen Hammond.
I'm Stephen Hammond, and I'm running for mayor of Victoria. City Council is broken. You tell me that at your doorsteps. I hear it when I'm volunteering with Big Brothers Big Sisters. My partner, Jack Boomer, hears it while walking our dog Willis and at his Arbutus Singers choir practice. If we don't address the problems we face, things will continue to get worse. The new bike lanes are dangerous, and we're being sued. Our money is being squandered on pet projects like removing statues and paying legal bills for disgraced officials. Businesses downtown are constantly under attack due to taking away parking and making streets impossible to navigate. My friend Mary is afraid to go downtown after dark. Neighborhoods feel that they are under siege, battling City Hall to preserve just a little of what makes Victoria special. When my neighborhood was in crisis with Tent City, the mayor and council sat back and did nothing. I stepped forward, and now I'm stepping forward to support all Victorians. That's why I'm asking for your vote.
Next, David Arthur Johnson.
My name is David Arthur Johnston. I stammer somewhat. Please don't judge me on that. I have a campaign of enlightened austerity to the likes that hasn't been seen before. I have so much horrible bad news, yet I remain the most capable candidate here. Thank you very much.
And now to Mike Gagan.
Hi, I'm Mike Gagan, and I've lived and or worked my entire adult life in Victoria. When I first moved here in 1985 to get my degree in economics from the University of Victoria, rent and housing were relatively inexpensive. When I got a job at the legislature, which included working 4.5 years as a ministerial assistant in the Mike Harcourt government, I was easily able to buy a house here in Victoria. But fast forward 20 plus years, and we are instead in a city that is sleepwalking towards a future where it will consist of only the very wealthy and the very poor. It's for that reason that I've entered this race. I believe it's critically important that we get serious about getting more funds for low income, mixed income, co-op housing, and most especially affordable housing so that young people can afford to start families in this city. I hope for your vote on October 20th.
Thank you very much, and that concludes our introductions. I just want to make a quick note that there will be one more candidate who will appear on your ballot when you vote October 20th. That is Chris Zamuda, who could not be here today. Now we move on to the next round of today's proceedings, and that is something we're calling the one-on-one debates. We'll be doing 2 of these over the course of this session, and here's how it works. Each candidate will get to ask one question to one of the other candidates, and it must be one of the other candidates. You'll have 30 seconds to ask the question, and then you'll have 2 minutes for an answer, but also to engage in debate with the person you've asked. We do ask that only the people involved in that speak during that time. If that all makes sense, we will proceed. Again, we're going to start at one end of the table and work our way down. Was there a question?
30 seconds to ask and 2 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Will the follow-up question be allowed?
Yeah, you will be able to ask follow-up questions as you go back and forth in
Within
that
the
2
2
minutes.
Right?
Yes,
Is that
correct,
the- yeah.
correct. So Saul Anderson, we'll go back to you at the far end of the table. You'll get first crack at this. You can pick one candidate. You have 30 seconds now to ask your question.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say kudos to CFAX for inviting us all and trying to create a balanced format. My question I'm going to direct at Rimo. Given that the media seems to have anointed the frontrunners, it's difficult to get coverage. The candidates' meetings are often structured or where the questions are weighted towards too many of the same people. So I know I run as a manifestation of my concerns for social justice, as my civic duty. And I'm just curious to know what you want the people to know.
And
what
2
you'd like
minutes
them to
now
know.
for a answer and debate.
Yeah, I would say that it's right off the bat, it's direct democracy. I think that we have to acknowledge that the majority of our city doesn't vote.
Right.
Over 50% of our city doesn't vote, and that's what's concerning for me.
Sure.
So I decided to run a non-traditional campaign, which, you're right, has gotten me little to no coverage.
Totally.
However, I'm not aiming for the traditional voter. I mean, if you
Sure.
want to vote, I'm not going to pander for that.
I'd win every time if I get all the people who didn't vote to vote for me.
Absolutely. And so it's just looking at non-traditional means to actually uphold democracy as opposed to myself as a single person vying for a job, or
Right.
applying for a job.
Yeah, sure.
And I guess the other thing is that I'm hopeful for the city.
So am I.
Cities,
I know. I'm not
cities are
afraid of
dynamic.
downtown. I'm not afraid of anything in the city. I think we have a brilliant future. I want to take the lead worldwide. Hey, everybody, come and see our green roofs. Look around for a while. I mean, people are going to want to stay here, and that is something we also have to acknowledge. There's going to be more traffic.
Yeah, and
more
as far as
people. It's a
planning, I
desirable
guess,
place.
I guess the thing is that I have complete faith in city staff. I would never take anything to the
Fundamentally,
public
yeah.
without the engineers, without the accountants, without the brilliant people just across the block at
All
the
hail
City Hall.
Canadian civil servants.
Yeah.
I mean, relatively free of corruption and taint. You know what I mean?
So,
Try that
yeah.
anywhere else in the world. Like, you know what I mean? Mexico, United States, worldwide problems. Canada, we're quite fortunate.
Yeah, and so I see my role as running as an option for Victoria to look at their candidates as representatives for them,
Yeah.
as the bridge between the brilliant, hardworking people at City Hall and the brilliant, hardworking people that are 9 to 5 or working these odd hours that can't make it out, because the traditional system is not including everybody. It's not even including the majority, and I'm quite
Right.
afraid of that.
Right, me too. You know, I mean, people say, call me a politician, and I'm like, no, I'm just a citizen. You know what I mean? Any idiot can run for office, as I have just demonstrated. So,
Thank you for your humble.
And that is time. Thank you very much for leading the way in our one-on-one debates. We're going to actually move to Rimo as the next candidate seated along the table. You have 30 seconds now to choose a candidate, ask a question, and then we'll begin the 2-minute debate.
So I'd like to pose my question to Lisa Helps. In regards, there has been an email sent out regarding the vandalism of signage, and I would like to know what Lisa Helps' position is regarding what is the role of vandalism in an urban setting.
Thank you for your question. Do you mean vandalism in an urban setting, particularly as it relates to election signs, or more generally?
Generally, absolutely. And as it's manifesting through election signs, I thought that we should bring that up.
Sure. Why don't we start with election signs? All of us running here and all of the 29 candidates running for council have put our name forward. We've got resources coming our way. We've got volunteers. We have hardworking people who are out there doing work on our behalf, particularly putting up signs.
Agreed.
And signs are a form of expression expression. And to have people, regardless of which candidate signs they're removing, to have people removing signs, I think is really unfortunate. It's a disservice to democracy. In terms of vandalism more generally, I think that when people feel like they belong to a place and that they belong in a place, and when they have places to freely express themselves, vandalism happens less. And I'll give you one example. The city has an artist in residence, and we put together with him a program called Concrete Canvas, and hired graffiti artists, mural artists, to actually paint walls in public spaces and private spaces, and there's an outlet. So when people have an outlet for their creativity and feel included as part of the community, I think there's much less propensity for vandalism.
I agree with that. So would you say the role of vandalism is highlighting the exclusion of those populists? Because you said when they're included and when they have space to say what they need to. And I'm not necessarily talking about removal of sign. I've seen them kicked over, bent over, and almost as if people are having something to say about maybe the fact that they're made of plastic and that we've already banned plastic bags. And it's a bit hypocritical to see a lot of us here, not myself included, using plastic bags on wire hangers for their own use, but then banning the people that are working here, in the shops.
We've banned single-use plastic bags for sure. My election signs all have a plan for repurposing. The plastic ones from last time have been repurposed this time, and we've got a very creative idea for repurposing them afterwards.
And that is time.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Moving along the line, we hit Alexander Schmidt. You have 30 seconds to ask your question, and then 2 minutes for debate.
Can I ask it to the same person who just...
Oh, you can pick anybody you would like to ask, yes.
Oh, this helps.
Thank you.
You're going to plan to audit the bridge, correct? And I was wondering, why wasn't it audited in 2015?
Why wasn't the bridge audited in 2015?
Yes.
Well, first of all, my record on the bridge was strict opposition to it. When I was on council and we received the contract asked to be approved, I read the contract in great detail, and I looked at the budget and I looked at the design, and we had a bridge that was 30% designed with a 4% contingency budget. Not good enough. And so I voted against the project. When I took office, my job was to get the project done. And when you audit a project in the middle of the project, there's a lot that gets missed. And I met with the Auditor General for local government early in my term, Gordon Ruth, after he was appointed the auditor, and I said, you know, what's your take? When we finish the bridge, would that be a good time to do an audit? And are we allowed to make requests of you as mayors and councils? And he said yes. And so my commitment to him and my commitment to the grumpy taxpayers earlier this year was that when the bridge project was finished, we would ask for an audit. The bridge project finished in late August when the South Side pedestrian walkway opened, and we brought forward a motion and are asking the Auditor General for local government to look at the project. Particularly, in my opinion, he should be looking at the procurement phase of the project. What went wrong there?
Mm-hmm. That's okay. That's what I wanted to ask. I wanted to know.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
We'll move along the line now, and it is time for Rob Duncan to ask his question.
Okay, I'm going to give the mayor a break for a minute. This question's for Mike Gagan. I've heard you say a number of times that you have a lot of friends who are builders and developers who are eager to help Victoria out of its housing crisis by building affordable housing, whereas a lot of people believe it's been reliance on private developers that's got us into the deplorable situation we're in now. Given the abysmal record of private development with regard to providing the kind of housing the community needs, how can you expect people to be so naive as to believe your claim?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that I participated for 7 years on Langford's Planning and Zoning Committee. So I saw firsthand how by having reasonable regulation and reasonable decision-making times, you can significantly lower the cost of building housing. Victoria has passed the STEP code. That adds $85,000 cost to each unit of housing. A building permit that you can get in a neighboring municipality in 48 hours takes 9 months to get in Victoria. That's why we've seen so few people take advantage of the Garden Suites program. So, and I can also tell you that you won't have to worry about developers by the time Victoria gets to STEP Code 3 because they won't be building anything in Victoria. I'm certainly a strong advocate for getting more in the way of provincial and federal dollars for low-income, mixed-income, and co-op housing. But I also recognize that instead of wasting money on bureaucratic red tape, we can lower the cost of housing for people, and we can also direct some of those cost-saving dollars into getting more in the way of low-income units built in these developments, so we're not just building condo towers for multimillionaires.
So you do acknowledge the role of social housing in this situation?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
let me be clear. Well, I'm going to hold the provinces and federal government's feet to the fire in terms of making sure that they're assisting in providing low-income housing, not just in Victoria, but throughout the region, because I do not want to see low-income housing concentrated. That's how you create a downtown east side. Instead, I want to see it throughout the region, and I'm also a big fan of mixed income housing so that people of different income levels, get to interact, and we don't end up with some kind of, Dickensian stratified society.
Okay, well, I guess I've heard you really emphasizing the role of private development and sort of, I'd say, neglecting to mention.
I appreciate the
social
opportunity to
housing quite a bit.
clarify. I'm also a big fan of getting more public dollars for low-income housing. I expect to do both.
Okay, thanks for
That
the
is
answer.
time. Thank you. Rob Duncan's question for Mike Gagan. Next along the line, it is Lisa Helps.
Thank you, Ryan. My question is for Stephen. Stephen, since January, I've been working with a wide cross-section of the community to develop a very detailed four-year plan. It's up there very clearly on my website for all to see. It's fully laid out, so people can see year by year, just as I did in 2014, what will happen. And the benefit of that is in 2014, I had a plan, I took office, I got right to work. So it's 2.5 weeks out from the election, and I'm just wondering when you are going to provide your detailed four-year plan for the residents and businesses of Victoria.
Well, thanks, Mayor Helps. I won't be working on your time schedule, but I will be. I continue to put out policies. I'm running with a team, newcouncil.ca. We've got Andrew Reeve, we've got Stephen Andrew, we've got Randy Joel, and Gary Alberts, who are also wanting to make a change on council. It's not just enough to make the change at the mayor's office. When you go to our website, you will see actually that we talk about many important things. We talk about fiscal responsibility. You have not been fiscally responsible. Even though you voted against the Blue Bridge, guess what? In my household, I voted against it. Jack voted in favor of it, but I don't get to not pay my taxes because I voted against it. You had all the opportunity for 7 years on council and mayor to do something about that, and you did not. And the cost overruns have been great. The other thing that I talk about is that neighborhoods will have a say in housing. And when I go to the doors, people are fuming, people are furious.
So, Stephen, what's your plan? What are your detailed policies?
My detailed policies are that we'll get into office. We will.
What if you don't get a full slate? What if it's just you?
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. I work with everyone, and I'm more than willing to work with everyone.
how are you-
I've been around politics all my life, and I talk to people so-called on the other side.
But what's your
and
plan?
you collaborate with people. My plan is we'll have fiscal responsibility. We'll make sure that we work with.
Are you aware?
We'll make sure we work with the developers. We work with the neighborhoods to make sure that they're not having their housing choices rammed down their throat. We will work with the police and social service agencies to make sure that the downtown is safe, and so that people have actual accountability for what is going on.
So I just have to ask you a question. Are you aware that since I became a councillor, and particularly since I became mayor, we've had the lowest tax increases over the last 10 years? It's there clearly on my website. Just wanted to ask if you're aware of that.
The tax increases have gone up over 22% in the 7 years that you've been on council, while inflation has gone up 9.2%. That is
Absolutely.
not a low tax rate, and we will hold it to the maximum of the rate of inflation.
How are you going to do that?
And that is time, I'm afraid, but there might be chance for follow-up later. So that was Lisa Help's question for Stephen Hammond. Next along the line, a question from Bruce McGuigan. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Boy, that was good radio. My question is for Mayor Helps. Lisa, when you were running for office 4 years ago, and indeed when you were on council previous to that, you placed a great deal of emphasis on the quality of communication and community engagement in which you were going to engage. And I'm quite concerned, as I talk to people on the doorstep, that they're concerned that City Council doesn't communicate with them, it pushes to them. That City Council has a communication department that pushes out at the citizens and no real mechanism to bring in citizen input. So my question is, you're still promising it, you still haven't done it. How can we be assured you're actually going to
All right.
do it this
2
time?
minutes now for the discussion.
Thank you very much for that question. When I took office as mayor, we did have a communications department. We repurposed the department, and we have a citizen engagement department. All of our staff have IAP2 training, and we have been out in the community more and more each year. Now, there's always more to do. Some of the feedback that we've received from neighborhoods like Hillside Quadra on the Topaz Park engagement, they had a great time. They feel like the park is designed based on their input. The Burnside Gorge Community Plan, we held workshops in furniture stores and gathered input. So I could list all of the things we've done well. We've had, more engagement activities than have been in the past, but it's not just quantity that matters, it's also quality. And part of what we've tried to do is reach out to a more diverse community. So this year, instead of having our typical public engagement summit, we held it at the Art Gallery, and we invited VERX and the Intercultural Association, their residents and members, to participate. So we have been reaching out beyond the typical engager, and I think what we're seeing is a feeling that there's still more to do. And one of the things that I'm good at is pivoting as necessary. And the Fairfield Plan is a perfect example. When we were working on the Fairfield Plan, it felt top down to the residents, and so they came to see me in my office and said, in a community drop-in, and said, can you fix this? And together we fixed it. And now the community had a storefront open. They've come up with great ideas. And so there will be missteps along the way. And the thing that you can count on me to do for the next 4 years is pivot when I get new information from the community and not shy away from saying, hey, we could have done this better in the first place. We've got community input and we can fix it.
I'm not assured. I see signs all up around the Central Park neighborhood regarding not being heard on their parks. The people in Cook Street Village have said to me repeatedly that they feel it was a top-down process. I'm a professional social researcher. I don't see a minimum standard of quality in the research around this.
And that is time. That was a question from Bruce McGuigan for Lisa Helps. We now move to Stephen Hammond. You have 30 seconds to pose your question.
Mayor Helps, the police complaint commissioner issued a scathing report about your behavior. You made it sound like it was a simple mistake. After all, you're a mayor and not an investigator. But yesterday, we discovered a letter from the lawyer who was investigating, asking you to proceed with more allegations of sexual harassment and bullying, but you chose to do nothing. Shortly after, you told the media that former Police Chief Elsner was, quote, the best thing that's happened to this town, end quote. How can women and the public trust you after your behavior to protect him and not city employees?
That letter that was published yesterday was already in the original report. There was no new information. That letter was already there. And what the letter says very clearly from the investigator is that she understood that we were now figuring out how to bring forward these allegations of bullying and harassment. What we did is we followed the advice of our lawyer. We brought the allegations forward in the investigator's letter. Our lawyer instructed us or suggested to us, finish the original investigation, ask the investigator to put the allegations of bullying and harassment in her letter, and bring it forward. When you said the
best thing that's happened to this town, when you knew that there were these other allegations, what was the best thing about a guy who now we know, and you knew something about this, that there was all these sexual harassment, bullying, and other inappropriate behaviors that ended up in the final report with him being fired?
Absolutely, Stephen. And as you knew, and as he was found in that original report, he misled the investigator. He misled our investigator.
But you misled the media, and you misled the public when you said that there was no investigation that was going on, and that in fact there was an investigation, and there should have been more of an investigation, and you chose not to go forward with that.
That is not true. We did not choose not to go forward with it.
It's in this letter, actually, that came out yesterday.
Well, the letter was already out. There's no new information. What we were doing is following the advice of our lawyer, which was to bring forward the allegations.
Counsel. I'm a lawyer. It's counsel. At some point, you have to decide what of this information are you taking, and what information do you go forward? Because there's more to public trust than just listening to the lawyers. Whenever two lawyers get into a room, one of them ends up being wrong.
Absolutely.
You are the head of the police board. You had a greater trust for the public and for women, and that's unfortunate.
Well, it is very unfortunate that I am being cast as somebody who doesn't care about women. That
I'm
is
not
very
saying
no,
that.
you're
I'm saying
not.
that
You're
you
not.
knew information.
And
I'm saying you
Stephen,
knew
we were bringing the
information and you did
information
nothing
forward.
about that.
We did not do nothing about it. If we had done nothing about it, it wouldn't have ended up in that letter.
That letter came out in November, and in December, you said he was the best thing that ever happened.
And what I should have said in December is from the perspective of the community. And we had this new information. We were bringing it forward from the perspective of the community.
And
that,
that
if you ask the
dereliction of your
community,
duty.
time for that
Dereliction of your
question.
duty.
I'll have to cut it off there, but thank you very much. That was Stephen Hammond's question for Lisa Helps. Moving on down the line, David Arthur Johnston, you have 30 seconds to pose a question to a candidate of your choosing.
My question is for Rob Duncan. I want you to imagine if the city had no cash. If the city had no cash, what would you do to help single parents utilizing the city's means and opportunities, the land it has, or the gear it has in the parks department, or rooms, or whatever? If sans money, how would you help single parents?
Oh, that would be a challenge with no cash. But I do think one way, well, single parent. One thing that single parents really need is childcare in a lot of cases. They rely on childcare to be able to work and other activities in their lives. One possibility would be to organize a groups of single mothers into childcare circles. So they could organize among themselves, schedule time when each of them could be available to take care of several kids at a time, that sort of thing. They could spell each other off, if you like, and that sort of thing. It could be done basically without cash, I think.
That's all I wanted to hear. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That was David Arthur Johnston's question for Rob Duncan. And now to the far end of the table where we get to Mike Gagan. You have 30 seconds for your question.
Thank you. My question is to Mr. McGuigan. Mr. McGuigan, you've run a clean campaign. I was wondering what you thought about the third-party online attack campaign directed against the incumbent and myself.
Wow, I was going to ask a question on this, Mike.
Oh.
I echo everybody's concern that we have a polite public process, and I thank Raimo for bringing that up and very clearly stating that at the beginning. And I am concerned, and just as a little bit of background, I went around in July when I was considering running for office, and I talked to the people who were currently declared as candidates, and I talked to new council. I met with Stephen, and Stephen invited me to his home, and thank you very much. And I met with the new council people there, heard about their campaign, heard about their perspective. I decided that I wasn't going to make an application to be involved with them because that was part of the purpose of the discussion. I wasn't rejected, I didn't apply. And because I felt that they were very conservative in their outlook. And at any rate, I do want to keep this positive, but what I see, and I wrote down the names of some of these sites: Victoria BC News Today, Victoria BC Today, Remove Lisa Helps in 2018, and others, and these things are a gross distortion of democracy. They paint us in the worst possible light as human beings and as a community, and all of these sites favor Stephen Hammond and new council. They repeatedly push every debate as a new council and Helps debate, or a Stephen Hammond and new council debate. There's a campaign of slander going on. There are all kinds of sock puppets and false Facebook accounts in a campaign of aggressive, well-coordinated, and apparently well-trained bullying of anybody who raises a point. If anybody actually successfully raises a point against new council or anybody or Stephen Hammond, that post is taken down, and sometimes the whole string is taken down so that they can't be forwarded to anybody else. So I'm concerned that there's been an utter failure on the part of Stephen Hammond and new council to stand up and honorably say that this is not appropriate, and I'm concerned that somebody who can't do that can't be mayor.
And that is time. That was Mike Gagan's question for Bruce McGuigan. This is a little unorthodox, but since most of that time was spent addressing a different candidate, I will give Stephen Hammond, if he chooses, 30 seconds to respond. I'd rather not wade into this too much, but in this particular circumstance, I'm going to allow this.
Thanks, Ryan. Bruce, you weren't. I invited you to our home to see other candidates. You weren't being asked. The fact that we have conservatives, I'm proud of the fact that we have got conservatives, liberal, NDP, Green. We've got all kinds of people from all over the slates, from all over the. But those politics have no place in City Hall. As far as the websites, I got to tell you, if other people are choosing on their own right to be slamming other candidates and not me, I can't help that. I don't even spend time. I'm at the doors.
Stephen, I didn't see any NDPers. I saw federal Conservative Party
well,
organizers.
You haven't been at our headquarters. We have
them
100 volunteers.
I'm going to have to cut that there. That was the 30 seconds. Thank you very much. And that actually concludes our second round of the debate, the one-on-one debate. We will have one more round of this coming up later, where the only change will be you have to ask somebody different. You can't ask the same person you asked in that round. But to take a bit of a change of pace here, we're going to move to round 3, where we will do the rapid fire round. In this round, we will go around the table and pose a question to each of the candidates, and the candidates will have 30 seconds to answer. We'll get through as many questions as we can as time allows, but we'll see what we can do. We also understand that all of the issues we'll be asking you about are deeper and more complex than a 30-second answer can possibly accommodate, so we hope that we can think of it this way. If you can quickly sum up your position on these questions in a way that maybe voters can follow up on later if they like what they hear or don't like what they hear. So the first question we're going to pick is on homelessness and housing, a topic we haven't heard too much about yet so far. The specific question is, what would be your approach to tent cities or semi-permanent encampments in public parks moving forward in the future? And we're going to start at Saul Anderson at that end of the table. 30 seconds.
So if I pass, do I get a different question?
No. But you can pass if you'd like.
I don't want to. Homelessness, poverty go hand in hand. We need to address inherent inequalities endemic to late advanced capitalism. No one will fix anything until we address that. Wage labor is still the enemy, and anyone who tells you different is deluded.
30 seconds now to Raimo.
Yeah, aside from following and continuing to fund a lot of the other city projects that are going on right now, I think we need to seek out federal funding. I think housing is a federal issue. We're one of the only G8 countries that doesn't have a housing strategy. It's ridiculous, and it's showing up on our streets because of the temperate climate. I don't think it has anything to do specifically with Victoria, and we need to recognize that as a nation.
One more time the question, what would you do, what would your approach be to tent cities or semi-permanent encampments that show up in public parks moving forward? 30 seconds to Alexander Schmidt.
Problem with homelessness can only be solved at a national level. The municipalities do not have means, resources to solve it. As mayor, I would meet with other mayors and other mayors' cities, petition the federal government to step in. Unless the problem is solved simultaneously in all provinces, the homeless people will just keep moving from city to city. I would also petition the province to restore funding for mental health institutions to take care of the most vulnerable ones. Thank you.
We can hear the debate happening behind us.
That's interesting. I will pass that along, and we'll see if we can solve that.
It's us chattering behind ourselves.
Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
Point of technical order. We'll see if we can sort that out. We will move along the line with another answer to the question. 30 seconds to Rob Duncan.
Well, we have to recognize that housing is a human right, and people living in tent cities are people whose human rights are being violated. I think it's deplorable to turn them out, to disband the camp where they have what they feel is a relatively safe community, something that they've been lacking, living on the street. I think it's deplorable to turn them out with no alternative, no housing. I would, as a short-term solution, I would suggest possibly setting up a municipal campground where they could have safe and healthy facilities.
Lisa Helps.
Thank you. When we had a tent city here, we worked with the province, encouraged them to buy up every vacant building in town, used our own vacant facilities like the Boys and Girls Club, and got people inside. The answer to homelessness is housing. And one of the things that I think is missed is this past term, we've put together an unprecedented $90 million fund to build affordable housing, including 400 units, renting at $375 a month. with supports for people who need them. So that will effectively end chronic homelessness in the region, and that is a regional solution. As Mike suggested, the housing will be built in Colwood, in Langford, and everywhere else. So that's the answer to homelessness, is housing.
Now 30 seconds to Bruce McGuigan.
I concur with the issue that Victoria can't continue to do this on its own. There's 13 municipalities in the region, and the citizens of Victoria and the infrastructure of Victoria being taxed to the limit with this. But housing is not just a housing issue. Housing is symptomatic of other issues. Deinstitutionalization of mental health and addictions treatment are the principal issues driving housing problems for street people.
And the question again, dealing with tent cities, to Stephen Hammond.
It is actually deplorable that in a country as rich as ours that people have to go to tent cities. And I understand that for people who are truly homeless, that it creates a sense of community. But I need to be very clear. I would never, ever authorize a tent city. Mayor Helps at Topaz Park, along with Ben Izzet, Councillor Ben Izzet, suggested a tent city. And you never do it because it's worse than doing nothing. The Cathedral had to withdraw their support. The YMCA had to close their washrooms. It is so dangerous that every judge says it's dangerous for people inside and out.
30 seconds now to David Arthur Johnston.
Tent cities are better than internment camps. I see constitutionally protected, community-driven tent cities. A lot of them, different themes. You got university tent cities, Gardner tent cities. The issue is, if you tell people that they can live rent-free, they're going to, and that's going to be bad for business.
And 30 seconds now to Mike Gagan.
As mayor, I would pursue a housing first strategy. In jurisdiction after jurisdiction, it's been shown that it's far more expensive to keep the homeless than it is to provide housing. And there's no way to treat the mental health issues, addiction issues, unless you house them first. Trying to treat them while they are homeless is an exercise in futility.
Thank you very much for that round of questions. We're going to have time for one more, I think, but only one more. So the last question for the rapid fire round will be on transportation. How do you plan to balance competing interests between cyclists, motorists, and pedestrians? We'll go back to Saul Anderson for 30 seconds.
I think that those groups coexist quite peacefully in general, other than, say, having more community forums where people could bring ideas. If the only way to communicate to City Hall is by going to a council meeting, I don't know if anybody's actually ever tried that. Not very edifying or encouraging. So there's other ways to connect with the public, and if there are problems, address them. But for the time being, I don't really see that as a huge problem.
Next, we go to Raimo.
I guess as far as the balance point goes, we can already go onto the OCP and see that we do put pedestrians, then cyclists, and then motorists in that hierarchy. To help support pedestrians, we really need to look at our developments and look at walking thoroughfares and make sure that those are open to the public so that we don't just have to walk alongside faster moving vehicles. As far as cyclists, I think that's a hot topic that everybody's excited to contribute with. But as far as motorists, we need to balance ourselves with cars for Victoria, but not just taking in Langford and further away municipalities. Thank you.
Next is Alexander Schmidt.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, the question again is, how do you plan to balance competing interests between cyclists, motorists, and pedestrians?
Well, you have to balance all of them, but you're missing one group. The one group you're missing is the people who have, what do you call them, carts, motor carts. Nothing is mentioned about them. So they have to be included. There was an interesting program when I went up to Fort St. James on the radio on 91.5. There was an interesting talk of bicycles and death rates and all that stuff. But I don't have enough time.
We do appreciate everybody fitting them into 30 seconds. It is a challenge for sure. The question again on competing interests in transportation to Rob Duncan.
Well, as far as walking is concerned, my platform includes the idea of encouraging the development of walkable communities where people can walk to work and to get services and shopping and that sort of thing. I think a lot of people feel like there's been a conflict in Victoria between cyclists and motorists. One way, I think, to alleviate that conflict, I think it's been heightened somewhat by the bike lanes. One way to alleviate it somewhat will be to put bike lanes on secondary roads instead of main streets.
Now 30 seconds to Lisa Helps.
Thank you. Missing from the question is transit. So cycling, walking, cars, and transit. How we balance all of those is by building a sustainable integrated transportation system for the 21st century. It means that sometimes people will walk, sometimes they'll bike, sometimes they'll drive, sometimes they'll take transit, and each one of those modes needs to be easy. We're in a pinch point right now because the downtown is growing and we don't have good transit to the West Shore. We're fixing all of that, and we can continue to do that so that there's car optional, bike optional, transit optional, and pedestrian optional, and all of those modes work together. Thank you.
30 seconds now to Bruce McGuigan.
Thank you. I think everybody's talked about this being an integrated solution, but I don't think anybody's ever made any effort to make it an integrated solution. One of the concerns that I have about our existing cycle infrastructure is it was almost designed and placed in order to score political points, that it was designed and placed along main thoroughfares and resulted in rather significant conflict with other road users, pedestrians, handicapped pedestrians, and transit.
Now 30 seconds to Stephen Hammond.
I'd like to give an example of the balance. There doesn't seem to be a balance at City Council because there's so often with this council, with the mayor and council, it's a win and a lose. When we think about the bike lanes, for example, some cyclists won, but the businesses downtown lost. And I was talking to a woman, 70 years old. She's had a shop for 22 years, and she said on 4th Street, and she said she's closing her business in December as a complete and total result of the bike lanes. You've got to listen to everyone and not just forge ahead because there is no balance.
David Arthur Johnston.
I'll be promoting a philosophy or a cultural shift where people live where they work and work where they live to sort of regulate the traffic in total. Other than that, the buses are good. I'd make the default ticket a $5 day pass. Well, if I had control over BC Transit.
Now to Mike Gagan.
Yes, the $15 million spent to date on these overly obtrusive bike lanes have caused serious safety concerns. With proper consultation, I would relocate those bike lanes from primary to secondary roads. I would use painting rather than hardscaping. And through that, we can get much better flow of vehicles, of buses on our primary arterial roads while ensuring the safety of bicyclists.
All right, thanks everybody for your answers. I'm afraid that is all the time we have for our rapid fire round, but we will get to our final round now, which is round 4, one-on-one debates, the sequel.
This time?
Oh, certainly. Does everybody feel comfortable with that? Provided everybody's agreed, we can certainly go that way. So, Mike, that means you again will get a chance to start off here. Just like the last round, we're giving candidates 30 seconds to ask one other candidate of their choosing a question. Then we will have 2 minutes for debate amongst those two individuals. The only difference is you have to pick somebody else other than who you picked in the first round. So, Mike, the floor is yours.
Yes, my question is to Mayor Lisa Helps. With regards to the bike lanes, did you do any consultation with disability groups, with seniors groups and the like, or was it simply a process of consultation with cycling advocates?
Thank you for the question. Our staff engaged a team of international experts to help us design a network and looked at what are the best practices, what are the guidelines say. I can't tell you for sure whether they engage the Disability Resource Center or not on the Pandora bike lanes. I can tell you for sure that adjustments have been made along the way in response to people's concerns, a curb cut at the McPherson Theatre and so on. Certainly on 4th Street, the second lane that we did a much broader engagement, having lessons learned from Pandora.
And what sort of feedback have you gotten from transit drivers and ambulance drivers? Because their ambulance drivers are telling me they're now avoiding 4th Street when they have emergency calls.
The feedback that we've received has been, as you say, mixed. The bike lanes are wide enough for an ambulance to go down them. That's my understanding. In terms of the transit buses, we did detailed engagement with transit on both Pandora and on 4th Street. So it was a little bit surprising to hear in the end that the transit drivers hadn't necessarily been engaged. The narrow lanes in the city started in 1995. So in 1995, our staff began narrowing lanes to 3 meters. And if you look around the city, there are a lot of lanes where it's a 3-meter width.
And was there any consultation done with the small business owners, some of whom have lost 20 to 30% of their annual revenue since the bike lanes have gone in?
Absolutely, especially once we got Pandora businesses, for the most part, were, you know, I guess some of them had "We Love Bikes" in the window. So it was a different story on Pandora. When we got to Fort, we did slow down and do more consultation with business. What I really want to see is 1 year later, how's business doing? Because what it shows, evidence from elsewhere over and over again, yeah, construction is disruptive, whether it's a bike lane or a sewage pipe or anything. But when the infrastructure is built, in most cases, in most places, sales actually go up. And so we'll look to see that evidence 1 year out.
Thank you very much. That was Mike Gagan's question for Lisa Helps. Next, David Arthur Johnston. You have 30 seconds.
Bruce, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I love it, man.
Do you think evil is real?
Evil lives in all of our hearts, and we just have to try to control it or eradicate it and move forward as human beings. It's part of our process of development that we carry around both good and evil all of the time, and we have to choose good.
That's what I wanted to know. It reveals a lot knowing that mechanically evil is just a sentiment and not an actual thing.
No, I think it's a thing, but it's a thing that lives in people. It's that selfish, angry, hostile, mad as hell approach to solving problems.
Right, but would you classify that as evil or insane?
Oh, let's go have a beer.
All right, no argument.
Thank you. That was David Arthur Johnston's question for Bruce McGuigan. Stephen Hammond, you have 30 seconds to choose a candidate and pose a question.
Rob Duncan, City Hall is being fiscally irresponsible. That's one reason the new council.ca was formed, to bring about fiscal responsibility. We're going to audit the Blue Bridge. Our kids can't afford another project like the Crystal Pool to become another financial boondoggle. We take a lot of hard-earned money from the taxpayers of Victoria. Rob, how would you cut the waste?
I agree. The Crystal Pool, I'm not in favor of the new project. I'm in favor of refurbishing the existing building. I think there are certain. I'm in favor of the call for a value for money audit for the Johnson Street Bridge, for sure. I'm also in favor of approaching other levels of government for more funding for the bridge. The province has never kicked in at all, you know.
Right. And at this point, there's been some hope and promise for the money for the Crystal Pool in order to avoid a referendum that my guess is, if the council went to the public, they wouldn't get a referendum after what happened with the Johnson Bridge. So going after different levels of government is a good thing. The unfortunate part is, I presume you're not interested in forging ahead until we actually have that money in our pockets.
That's right, yeah.
Or it's been, yeah. And so the thing is, are there other things that you can think of to cut waste within the city if you were mayor?
Well, not off the top of my head. I can't think of a lot of things.
Okay.
Well, one thing that have kind of puzzled me over the years is why the Victoria Police Department needs a fleet of full-size SUVs to patrol downtown Victoria.
Right. And I guess the sad part is that if there is so much concern about going downtown, and there's, you know, because crime isn't always just statistics, it's actually a feeling. And if people have that and they feel as though they need more support from the police, it seems to me as though if we had more accountability, more responsibility downtown, then perhaps we wouldn't need as much patrol there, and people would actually have the opportunity to have patrols in other parts of the city, because so much of the resources right now are going to the downtown where it's desperately needed.
Right. Well, that may be true, yeah. I was going to say to patrol downtown we'd need police officers on foot rather than driving SUVs around.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right, that was Stephen Hammond's question for Rob Duncan. Next, we go to Bruce McGuigan. 30 seconds.
Hi, my question is for Stephen Hammond. Stephen, you've been, and your new council political party have been very, very detailed in your criticism, anger, fear about public policy issues, and very accusatory of people who are currently involved in politics. Yet you have no details, and extremely detailed, you have no details about your own platform other than trust us, a group of negative and hostile people, when we eventually all end up on council and take it over. How are you going to stop being so negative? When are you going to start giving positive messages about what you're actually going to do?
All right,
Well,
2 minutes now for the debate.
Of course, I take great exception to suggesting that we are angry and we are spreading fear.
You're not mad as hell.
Excuse me, I'm answering. No, you know what? I was mad as hell. after 6 months of my community being assaulted and a gun pointed at people and knives and needles all over the place.
I was 2 blocks away.
For 6 months, the mayor and council did nothing. And that is what it took for us to actually get more support for that community. And those people are grateful that I and other people were willing to come forward about that. But that was at a time when nothing was being done. And it's tragic that that's what it took. When Del Manick was the acting chief at the time, when he went to council to finally get some more money for that neighborhood for enforcement, he came up to me, and I'm not saying he's endorsing me, but he came up to me and he said, "Nice to meet you, Stephen. Thanks for kicking us in the butt." So everyone had every opportunity to talk to the mayor and council, and they did nothing, and that's why people were furious. No one wants our city to have to go to that extreme. But right now, you go to our website, and you will find all kinds of plans. You will find all kinds of policies there.
I've been to your website. I'm a policy analyst. I see nothing resembling
well, then
real
I guess you're not
policy.
looking. Because especially if you go to Andrew Reeves' site, one of the candidates, you will find so many policies on there that you maybe will be surprised. Maybe you just haven't been looking lately.
I see
We have a
Post-its, not
platform-
real policy.
We have a platform of going forward, but it's up to the electorate to decide, not for you to decide whether they like the platform that we've got.
I am a voter
we
as
are
well.
we are identifying areas where there are problems. Otherwise, if everything was fine, we wouldn't be running. We'd have better things to do with our time. But we see a mayor and council with a dereliction of their duties,
I don't
and so
concur.
that
You're
is
doing
why
a
that we
campaign of
are.
fear, the
Well, you
characteristic
call it that,
right-wing
but at the
campaign of
doors,
fear.
at the doors,
It's a
people are
campaign
thrilled
of
with our
fear.
campaign,
It's a
and they're thrilled with our
conservative
policies.
campaign of fear.
We have a full
And,
full scope of all people from all political parties.
And that is time. Bruce McGuigan's question for Stephen Hammond. Moving down the line, Lisa Helps, it's your turn.
Thank you very much. My question is for Raimo. Two of the things that aren't getting a lot of attention in this campaign are two things that I know are very important to many of our residents, and they're things that the city's been working really hard on in the last 2 years. One is climate action, and the other is arts and culture. And I'd love these to be more a part of the campaign because they're important to our residents, and I know these are dear to your heart. So Raimo, if you're elected, or for whoever's elected, what's your advice on what we do for climate action and how we raise the profile of arts and culture in our community?
I think that's a beautiful question because I think the second part, talking about arts and culture is how you address climate change. It's not just one policy after one policy. We need to give people something palatable for them to get the bigger picture, to be able to participate, to be able to own the change that is needed. I think that when we look at art, we have to recognize that there's the spoken word, there's the written word, there's language arts, but anything that is conveying messages and meaning is just as viable for getting that out there. And I think that's probably where we're most underrepresented is some of the performance arts, some of the visual art, and all the other arts that I'm not mentioning, that the city is picking up. I appreciate that our Indigenous artist in resident is primarily performance artists and has brought a lot of attention to different things. And I just think that the city needs to take it a step further, and anybody on council or that becomes a mayor of the city needs to understand that reaching people, reaching cultural shifts, and changing the city as a leader in climate change takes getting the message across. And I don't know what your thinking on that is.
Well, we have both a climate leadership plan and a arts and culture plan called Create Victoria. And it's the climate leadership plan is bold, it's ambitious. It really is going to set us on a course for a sustainable city for the future. The arts and culture plan, again, it hasn't gotten much airtime, but I feel so proud and so happy from the arts and culture community that put it together. It's called Create Victoria. And the thing that they said they needed most was an affordable, accessible arts and culture performance space. And so we've been working with the provincial government that owns the old Bastion Square Courthouse, with the Victoria Foundation, with others, to retrofit that 30,000 square foot facility into an affordable performance space for arts, culture, tech, programming. So it's quite exciting, and that was one of the things that came out of that plan.
Thank you to council and staff for making that happen.
Thanks.
That was Lisa Helps' question for Raimo. Next, Rob Duncan.
This is a question for Mayor Helps. Many people think you've done a very poor job of addressing Victoria's housing crisis, and especially the crisis in the rental market. 4 years ago, when you became mayor, Victoria's rental vacancy rate was equivalent to zero. Now, 4 years later, the rental vacancy rate is still equivalent to zero. My question for you is, how is this possible? What have you been doing for the last 4 years, besides maybe fiddling while Rome burns, that has resulted in such neglect of Victoria's housing crisis?
Thank you very much. That's a really excellent question, and I know that that's on people's minds. When we took office, as I outlined in my opening remarks, there was a lot of stuff to clean up. We had a bridge that wasn't finished. We had a sewage project that wasn't started. And more importantly, we had no new rental housing built in this city for 30 years. Zero. The first building that was approved was in 2012, nothing approved since the 1980s. And so we did have to spend the first part of the term cleaning up our act, as Mike says. Although his numbers are a bit off, it doesn't take so long to get a development permit anymore as it did when I was elected. So that's what we looked hard at the planning department and said, we need to clean up our act to process projects faster. And so that's what we did, and that's what you see in terms of the building boom. We had to get some supply happening. But that's not enough. And we've been hard at work putting in place pieces for more truly affordable housing. The market is not going to deliver affordable housing. Supply is not enough. And I get so sick and tired of hearing that if we just build, supply is enough. So we've put together this program that I already mentioned, the $90 million Regional Housing First program. That will build 400 units at $375 a month and another 1,600 units that are affordable throughout the region. We put aside city-owned land at the Burnside School site to partner with Pacifica to build affordable housing for families there. That's underway. We're doing a new fire hall on Johnson Street. There's going to be about 130 units of affordable housing on top of the city's fire hall, also run by Pacifica. We're looking at all of our land, all of our assets to see what can we do with the assets we have at the same time as using the unprecedented funding from the federal and provincial governments. So it's taken a lot of time to put together a plan and to put together the money. The beautiful thing about the current historical moment is we have money, we have a plan, we just need to start building.
Just touching on one point, the 400 units of supported housing are rolled out over 4 years. That's 100 units per year. When I hear those kinds of numbers, it just tells me that people don't understand the scope of the problem.
Absolutely, and you put it so well. And oh, is that it?
Just very quickly finish your thought.
So the units built at 375 are unheard of, and to get 400 units at 375 a month with supports, 100 a year, it seems slow, but it's better than it has been forever.
Cut it there.
Thanks.
That was Rob Duncan's question for Lisa Helps. Next along the line, Alexander Schmidt. You have 30 seconds to ask a question.
I ask for more. What are you thinking about the policing in the center of town? Is it good enough, or it's not good enough, or?
Yeah, the police is something I'm very interested in. I think we'll take that right back to a cultural aspect. I don't think that our police are as welcomed as they could be downtown. I don't think that their presence is something people look forward to. I think that those people put in extremely hard hours and come in with the best of intentions, but I don't feel like that's conveyed right now. So
you mean they are being stereotyped negatively?
Correct. Yeah, I believe that when you see a uniform show up, it feels like it has a palatable taste in the air that it's not positive. But these people are out there to help. Mm-hmm. I want people to understand that, and I would love to create an image of the police that reinforces that. I've heard today foot patrols. I would also like to see the police be able to be invited into a lot of different spaces that they traditionally haven't been able to access, to bridge some of even the national and international stigma against police. I think if you look to...
How about having them on bikes?
On bikes, they are on bikes right now.
They are?
Yeah, you'll see them on some of their mountain bikes right now. And I think that's exactly it, is that we're seeing them grow their image as the city grows its image and its way of transporting. I think the big thing is that we can look and lead an example of some of the Scandinavian countries where it's just a civil servant job, and it's something that people admire. It's something people look up to. And I think that there's a little bit of a divide right now, and I think that could even be seen as a safety concern, as an access concern.
And they should be also accountable for their actions.
Oh, yeah, of course. I don't think there's ever been argument that the police should be accountable for their actions. I just think that we should develop a culture that supports them and that allows them to be supported by the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alexander Schmidt's question for Raimo, and that now moves to Raimo. You have 30 seconds to choose a candidate and pose a question.
All right. In the spirit of collaborative conversation that's happening at this end of the table, I guess I'd like to pose my question back to Saul, who was so lovely to ask me a question.
Oh, right on, thanks.
I'd like to thank everybody who's still tuned in, and I'd like to ask you a
Hopefully
question.
they're still tuned in.
In an effort for collaborative conversation, my next question to you is, what's your view on territorial acknowledgements?
Well, generally, I guess I'm taking a knee on the territorial acknowledgement. I think we all are aware of the homelands that we're on.
But do you really?
I think it's just lip service, ultimately.
Okay, yeah.
And it doesn't do enough to address the genocide and failed eradication of culture that is the history of Canada. Nothing will bring that back, but I'd be more. Thankfully, it still has a heartbeat, though. Or
The culture?
The culture is still
Absolutely.
alive and beginning to hopefully flourish again. But it's not because of our efforts. It's mainly, I think, the community itself needs to be provided unencumbered funding to heal itself. You know, I'd be curious to know what Wade Davis has to think about it, or other ethnobotanists or anthropologists. You know what I mean? What do the communities themselves have to say?
I agree with that 100%.
Have you been to the wellness center at Songhees?
I haven't. I actually
Yes.
no. I was there once.
It's
but
beautiful.
Not. Under
And
any
I
kind
mean,
of-
as far as I know, you know, that was their own initiative from within the Indigenous community, and that's the kind of healing and reparations I think you know we owe to ourselves and to humanity to try and replace what we decimated. And I don't mean we at this table, obviously, or we in the city today, but we are heirs to that.
in a colonial sense.
In the
yes.
colonial sense. And
Yeah.
all those vestiges of colonialism, whether it's paying lip service to the, you know, as I say, the land we stole, isn't helping, isn't getting us anywhere.
Yeah, I agree completely with your sentiment about
Thanks.
recognizing colonialism. I agree completely that that anything as far as regarding Indigenous peoples needs to come from Indigenous peoples and be led from Indigenous
Right.
peoples, and we'll support that.
Exactly.
But I do think there's an
Well-
important role, and it's not just lip service, of providing any avenue, including territorial acknowledgements.
Sure.
And that is time for the question.
yeah, indeed. I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Raimo's question for Saul Anderson, and now we do move to Saul Anderson for the final
Thanks.
question in this
Thanks.
round.
I was going to say that when I said I would fix traffic, first of all, I meant traffic for everyone, including pedestrian, cycling, and transit users. By his own admission, it seems that Mike is at least partly responsible for the sprawl over the mountain that is Langford, a series of irresponsible big box stores and single-family detached homes. So I was going to ask Rob Duncan what his thoughts were, but he already got to get his answer in. So my real question is for Bruce. You have a
And make it quick. We're almost at time.
you have a background in criminology.
A little bit, yeah. I've taught criminology.
So what is your position on social justice?
Okay, that is the question. We have 2 minutes.
Oh, Cornell West, social justice is what love looks like in public. You know, well, social justice is about caring for your community. Everything we see as crime is a symptom of a social failure, quoting H.G. Wells, that we failed as a civilization when we see crime. That's
So how do we
one
fix
take
that?
on it.
How do we fix that then? What's your approach? Is it
There's-
more policing? Where does restorative justice fit into your paradigm? Are you familiar with that?
Oh, I'm
Is
quite
it-
familiar with restorative justice. I've done some work in that area with juvenile delinquents a very long time ago. I think or juvenile delinquents, young offenders, I'm sorry, but that
Well,
ages
you
me
see?
because it used to
And
be the
that's-
Juvenile Delinquents Act that I was working under at the time.
That's a reflection of what I'm trying to identify is the language and style and the communication.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I worked with kids involved in the justice system for 10 years. I've taught criminology. I've worked very closely with training young people who are going to be peace officers or do regulatory enforcement in a wide variety of areas.
Okay.
I think one of the issues that's recently come up is the ask for more police constables, and I think that represents a social
Do
failure.
you think that's the answer?
No, I'm
More
not
co- more
finished the
cops?
answer. No,
No,
I
no,
didn't say that. I
no,
said
it's-
that's a social
I'm
failure.
agreeing
I
with
think
you.
we need to not hire more cops.
Actually,
We need to
you're right.
hire people who are going to be able to solve the problem
Yeah.
through how they relate to people who are having difficulties in our society. We need more social workers, counselors, people to coordinate resource access for those people in our community who
Right.
aren't getting it. We don't solve problems of addictions, mental health, or social isolation with people equipped with a gun and a taser and handcuffs.
Totally. I couldn't agree with you more. Well, thanks for that answer. That was
You're very
that was-
welcome.
That was illuminating.
But I'm sorry I had to raise my voice. I wanted to get my point
I
across.
wasn't trying to. I was agreeing with you. Like, you think that's the answer? You know, I mean,
Yeah,
it was like.
I'm not trying to bully my
Yeah.
answer. My wife says I have to be careful because I'm a big guy.
Aha. Yeah, I know the feeling. Yeah. White male privilege. I've been trying to give it up for years.
Well, thank you very much. That is time for Saul Anderson's question for Bruce McGuigan, and that is time for our debates. Thank you all for participating. Thanks to everybody who came. Again, we have a number of candidates here. We're going to give them a quick second to introduce themselves, but I also want to acknowledge that there are 9 candidates in the room. There will be 10 on your ballot. Chris Zamuda could not be here, but he will be appearing on your ballot when you vote October 20th. So going back to the original order, I only have time for 10 seconds to just one more time introduce yourself to voters.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm Saul Anderson, 3 generations living in the same house in James Bay for nearly 25 years. I wanted to reassure you all that voting will be easy. My name will be first on the ballot.
Hi, I'm Raimo. For the majority of you that don't traditionally vote, I hope you'll find my name as among others on the ballot that you'll find in favor. Thank you. Again, it's Raimo or at heyraimo.com.
My name's Alexander Schmidt. My website is alexanderschmidt.ca. Thank you very much. But I'm going to make a statement. If you don't vote, don't complain.
My name's Rob Duncan. I'm running for mayor because I really think the housing crisis needs to be addressed. I think it's the biggest problem facing our community right now, and we need to make it the top priority for government.
I'm Lisa Helps. I'm your mayor. I've been working hard for the last 4 years, and I'd like to continue to work hard for the next 4 years. And I look forward to the opportunity to continue serving you, and just want to thank my fellow candidates for the illuminating conversation this morning. Thanks, Ryan.
I'm Bruce McGuigan. I'm a candidate for mayor in the city of Victoria. I want to thank everybody for coming here. It's been a very enlightening discussion.
My name is Stephen Hammond, and I'm running with the team newcouncil.ca. I love this city, I care about this city, and I know that Victorians care as well. If you're interested in being part of it, vote for Stephen Hammond and newcouncil.ca.
My name is David Arthur Johnston, and I'm married to this town, feeling a huge responsibility after I catalyzed tenting becoming legal. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike Gagan. I'm running for mayor, and I'm going to encourage all of you to get out and vote on October 20th. And if you'd like more information about me, go to votemikeformayor.ca.
That's it for the CFAX 1070 debate for those running to be mayor of Victoria. And again, most importantly for those listening, don't forget to vote on October 20th. And stay tuned to CFAX 1070 for full coverage of this 2018 municipal election.
Thanks, Ryan.